There's this big house I pass by every Sunday on my way to church. I always see this handsome young man on the balcony of the house, and he always waves to me when I pass by. But one Sunday, I saw him standing outside the gate of the house. He said hi to me and asked me if I wanted him to escort me to church. This was the first time I have ever spoken to this man. I nodded yes, even though I thought he was joking. He told me to give him 10 minutes. He went back into his house, got dressed, and came out with his car. He asked me to get in and give him the directions to my church. Everything happened so fast. I got into the car and showed him the way to my church. After the church service, he went to drop a huge envelope into the church offering bowl. On our way back from the church, he told me that he had always wanted to come to my church with me on Sundays when he saw me, but he was too shy. He asked if it would be okay with me for him to join me every Sunday on my way to church. I told him I'm very okay with it. My pastor called me that night and asked me who the man I came to the church with was. I told her it was just a man I met on my way to church, and she asked me to come to the church with him the next Sunday because he gave a lot of money to the church. Let's call this man John. That is how my friendship with John started. Later, he told me he had fallen in love with me, and the truth was that I was feeling him too. We started dating a couple of months later. John became an active member of the church, and he was always giving huge sums of money to the church. My pastor loved him and was always calling him to check up on him. He treated me so well, and he was always spending on me. He took me out of the country for vacation 4 months after we started dating. It felt like I was in a fairy tale. I could see a lot of women in the church were jealous of me because even in the church, he only had eyes for me. Everything was going great till I was at his house once cooking for him when he entered into the kitchen and asked me a question. I told him to hold on because I was on the phone with a friend. This was about 6 months after we started dating. Immediately I ended the call, John slapped me hard across the face. Just like that, out of nowhere. He warned me never to keep him waiting ever again. Then he walked out of the kitchen. After the slap, I just took my phone, left the food on the fire, and ran out of his house. I cried all the way back home. I still didn't understand why he slapped me. I was only on the phone for less than 10 seconds. I blocked his number after I got home, and I made up my mind to cut all contacts with him. The next day, the slap left a huge mark on my cheek, and I had to put on makeup to hide the mark. I didn't hear anything from him throughout that day. But when I woke up the next day, I saw about 30 missed calls from an unknown number. I knew immediately that it was him, so I didn't call back. I avoided him throughout that week. I was so scared of seeing him in church that I almost didn't go, but I just decided to go. I saw him in church that Sunday, but I avoided him. After the church service, my pastor called me. She told me John had spoken to her. He said he was sorry and that what happened between us will never happen again. My pastor asked me to forgive him and that it was our job as Christians to forgive those who sinned against us. I respected my pastor a lot, and it was because of her that I spoke to John that this man was crying as he apologized to me. He said he didn't know what came over him. He told me he loved me so much and he didn't know what he would do without me. I forgave him that day and continued dating him. Now, my pastor had a daughter who was about 5 years older than me. She was a therapist and she did counseling for couples in the church sometimes. I'll come back to her later. After I forgave John, he showered me with gifts and attention, and I almost forgot what he did to me. I've been talking to him about starting an online business. He had already told me he wants to marry me, but he was well to do, so he didn't want me to work. He just wanted me to become a housewife. I was teaching at the time we met and he asked me to stop. I never really loved teaching, so I stopped. So John was basically the one taking care of me and giving me allowance. So I spoke to him about the online business and he was against it. He said I was making him feel less than a man. He asked me if I was lacking something and I told him no. Then he told me he didn't want me to stress myself and that I should relax. He said he was going to take care of me for the rest of my life, but I still wanted to do something for myself. So I started selling off some of the gifts he bought for me and saving the allowance he gave me. Then I started an online boutique. I kept this a secret from him. A couple of the women in our church bought some of the clothes from me, and I don't know if this was how he found out, but he did. And that day, John slapped me across the face again, punched me in my stomach, and warned me never to keep a secret from him again.